Welcome, kindreds. It's Jessica with your reading for the new moon in Sagittarius. This is going to be an astrology reading, also tarot. I'm going to bring tarot into it. These are our cards from last time. I'm going to use the Intuitive Night Goddess Tarot, which is a new deck to me that I've been absolutely loving for our cards for this moon cycle. So the reading is for the new moon in Sagittarius, which is on the 1st of December, and because it's a new moon reading, it lasts for that whole cycle of the new moon. So it's going to take us all the way until the 30th of December. I am looking at my honeycomb planner at the lunation chart, which this is my honeycomb planner. I did do a video showing this in a little bit more detail, so I'll remember to link that down below for you if you're interested in the planner. But you don't actually need to know anything about astrology or about tarot to get the benefit of this reading, because I'm going to explain it all for you. I've been studying astrology for like over 30 years now, and I find the lunation charts a really amazing way of like dividing that year into manageable sections and really getting a feel for what that section of time is. And that is why I offer these readings, because I think they are really valuable, really helpful. And yeah, if you do have any comments, then please do let me know down below and I can reply to those. So this is the chart for the new moon in Sagittarius. We have the sun here and the moon at 9 degrees of Sagittarius. When we have the new moon, that is always when the sun and moon are in the same place in the chart. So this time it's at 9 degrees of Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a mutable fire sign, and it is ruled by Jupiter, which we find kind of opposite, not like exactly opposite, but fairly closely opposite at 7 degrees, 17 degrees of Gemini. So this moon is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is seen as being like the greater benefic in astrology. It's the planet that gives us gifts. It's the planet that gives us luck. It's like in we call it Jupiter now, but it's also called Jove, and that's where we get the word jovial from, that kind of like jolly, Father Christmassy, kind of feels from Jupiter. So Jupiter is actually ruling this moon, but Jupiter is actually retrograde and in detriment at the moment in Gemini, because Jupiter is at home in Sagittarius. That's the sign where Jupiter feels most at home. It's like an expansive sign. It's a mutable fire sign. It can kind of like change quickly, have lots of great ideas, like sparks, excitement, all that kind of stuff. And then across in Gemini, Jupiter's character is a little bit different. It's not like, it still is expansive, but it is more kind of like thinky. It's a little bit more it kind of concerns itself sometimes with kind of like smaller matters. Jupiter tends to be like very much like a big picture thinking kind of planet, whereas with Gemini we're talking more kind of like details and like smaller thinking. And in our culture we tend to prioritize big picture thinking. It's like, oh yeah, we need to be always focusing on the big picture. What's the big picture? And like that's important, but really it's those like little details of our lives, the things that we do every day, that the everyday magic, those moments are what makes up our lives. I feel like there's a quote that I can't remember, but it's something like, it's like how we spend each day determines how we spend our lives, or something like that. It's like what we actually do on our day-to-day, how we live our lives, the people we connect with, the way we communicate, all that kind of stuff is what actually makes an impact in our lives, which makes a difference in our lives. So yes to big picture thinking, and there's definitely like a very dreamy quality about this cycle as well, but also yes to small picture thinking, to thinking about those details, to be thinking about the everyday magic. And we've also got Mercury retrograde at the moment, sort of close-ish to this new moon, and Mercury is like very closely opposite to Jupiter. So they are actually in mutual reception with each other at the moment, because Mercury is the ruler of Gemini and Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius. So they're staying at their homes. They've kind of done like a house swap. So we've got Mercury in that like big picture thinking sign of Sagittarius, and then we've got Jupiter in that more kind of like detail oriented, playful, seeing both sides of things, seeing all the possibilities kind of thing sign of Gemini. And so they're both, like I say, staying in each other's houses, but they're also both retrograde. And so it's like there's not that, like, for this whole moon cycle, it's probably going to feel a little bit like not a lot of progress is made. And like in a culture which really favors progress, it's like if you're not, you know, seeing an end product from this, if you're not making money out of this, or, you know, if this doesn't have a tangible outcome, then it's just not worth doing. That's going to feel strange to us probably. But I'm actually kind of excited about it, because I feel like what this is an invitation to in this cycle is to dream, is to play, is to, especially with things that perhaps we used to love when we were younger. Like if you think back to when you were a child, what were the things that you know, like you would be doing them and you'd be so engrossed in what it was that you were doing that you wouldn't even be conscious of the stuff that was going on around you, you know? And like, let's be real, there's a lot of stuff going on around us right now, you know? There are awful genocides taking place. There is like people just pitted against people. There's a lot of like just hate and opposition, and people very entrenched in the way that they think and unable to sort of see other people's points of view. That's kind of the climate a lot of us are finding ourselves in now. So this moon cycle actually feels to me like a bit of a gift. It is giving us just like a kind of little bit of breathing space to, and like funny with saying breathing, because we have got that Gemini, like Gemini's connected with the lungs with breath as well. So like perhaps some like literal breathing space can be going on, a time to expand our breathing. When was the last time you actually took like a proper deep breath and got into that parasympathetic nervous system and calmed down, you know? Because it's really hard to do that when we're just being bombarded all the time with like bad news, conflict, you know? It just pulls us out of ourselves and makes us really anxious. And like Sagittarius can be like a little bit agitating to the nervous system. But I think with both of these planets in retrograde, with Mercury retrograde and Jupiter retrograde forming that opposition and very much directly connected with this moon, it's inviting us to create some breathing space. It's inviting us to look back at those things that we loved when we were young, when we were small, when we didn't kind of have that idea of productivity and having to have like an end goal to everything that we did. And what are those things? What were those things for you that you could just lose yourself in? And like, it's funny that we say like lose ourselves, but really we're finding ourselves, because we lose like the kind of illusion of the solid, like the sort of solitary self. We get out of our heads basically, don't we? You know, like for me, it was playing the piano and singing. I used to, when I play the piano and sing, I just like, I'm just in it. I'm a human being rather than thinking or, you know, analyzing or anything like that. What is it for you? You know, I also find I do this, like if you just like lie down and watch the clouds or something like that, there's so many things, you know. For you it might be baking, or it might be reading, you know, drawing, painting, you know, anything. It can be anything. Don't judge it, basically. It's about kind of reconnecting in with something that just brings you joy, something that curates and creates everyday magic in your life, and just allows you not to spiritually bypass, you know, like not to be like, oh, it doesn't matter what is happening in the outside world. It's like, what's it called? Like, you know, like when people just don't acknowledge that there's like kind of stuff happening, you know, and kind of just pretends like everything's fine, la la la. It's not that. It's not like sticking your head in the sand. That is not what I mean at all. It's actually allowing your system, yourself, to regulate again, to connect in with the essence of who you are. Because when we are under such an onslaught all the time, we need those spaces, we need those activities, we need that joy, that connection, that peace that comes through that connection even more. And it's not about like pretending that everything's fine. It is about finding your own peace and joy and connection, even though things aren't fine. Yeah. So that's the main message, the main signature of this moon for me. I really feel like if you can do that in this cycle, and like, you know, you know, in different places in the world, people will perhaps be celebrating Christmas. I know lots of people who watch my channel are not necessarily into Christmas, because, you know, it's got a lot of well, you know, like technically it's a Christian festival now, but like, you know, it has got roots that go back a lot further than that as well. But this whole season, and that's probably a really good like analogy for it really, is, you know, like this Christmas has become this kind of like commercialized capitalist thing, like monster, behemoth, you know, that we have to kind of take part in, and we have to like go bigger, better, you know, even more, you know, we have to do this elf on the shelf, and we have to do all, you know, like make it magical. And it's like you can force magic, you know, like it's like you can, but should we, you know, like, is that something that actually serves us? Is that actually something that serves the people that we love, that we're like running ourselves ragged trying to create these experiences for them? Like, I don't think so. I don't think that's not coming from a place of love. That is coming from a place of exploitation, a place of wanting to force and to kind of like extract the maximum amount of cash out of people, so that they will like have to do all these things to live up to the expectations of what things are supposed to look like. So that is like one view of Christmas. But we can also view it as this magical time, which like in the Northern Hemisphere is very like physically dark. You know, there's a lot of darkness around. It's dark in the mornings, it's dark in the nights. To be honest, here in Wales, it's dark through most of the day in December. But when that happens, when we're in dark times, finding like the lights, the little fairy lights sparkle even more, then there's even more magic in those small things. And I don't know, like to me, there is still magic in this time of the year. There is still big magic in this time of the year. And it doesn't have to be tied into like gift giving or experience creation, you know. What it really is like there is this magic that is around and we can tap into that, and we can be in the flow of that without forcing, without making something happen. It's about like really like not making things happen, and just allowing and opening to the possibility that there is already magic. We don't have to force, we don't have to push, we don't have to buy in order to make this time special. It is already special, and that all of that extra stuff has come afterwards when people are trying to capitalize on that kind of special magic of this particular season that we find ourselves in now. So yeah, I feel like I'm kind of ranting a bit, but but it feels relevant. It feels important to me. So we've got, like I said, that whole Jupiter-Mercury opposition, and then, you know, kind of close to this moon, and that mutual reception, everything that's going on is just inviting us to step back into that past self of like being a child and just experiencing this time free from all of the bullshit that kind of comes with it now. And yes, while still acknowledging that there is stuff happening around us, carving out moments for connection with ourselves and our own little pockets of peace amongst the crazy, really, because we need that. We still need that, even though, you know, at the same time acknowledging that for some people it is not possible right now. And we have also got that opposition making a T-square down here to Saturn. And Saturn is now direct in Pisces. And I feel like that has been one of the biggest shifts in this year, actually. Like, because while Saturn was retrograde, like Saturn in Pisces is not really like that at home. And when Saturn was retrograde in Pisces, it was even more like kind of like really weird energy. And now that Saturn's moving direct again, I feel like and it's funny that I feel like I know I say that a lot. I feel like this. I always wanted to be talking about that. But I do feel that since Saturn has moved direct in Pisces, I can understand my feelings better now. While Saturn was retrograde, I was finding that I was like confused about how I actually felt sometimes about things. I would have to like get a bit like thinky about it rather than just like experiencing the feelings themselves. And now that Saturn is direct in Pisces again, I feel like I can understand, oh, I feel like this because of this, you know, whereas I was like, I'm feeling like this, I'm confused. That was all like a big thing for me while Saturn was retrograde. I don't know if that was the same for you. You can let me know in the comments if you've been feeling that shift. But yeah, since November now, where Saturn has been direct, it feels different, and I'm glad for that. You know, it's only just kind of like starting to move forward really now in December, so this is quite a recent change. But yeah, I'm already noticing that it feels better to me. It feels more coherent to me. It feels like I'm getting somewhere now. I feel like I can get a hold of my feelings rather than them kind of like slipping out of my grasp too quickly before I can really be like, well, what is going on here? You know. And when we do have a T-square, I always like to look opposite that T-square to what isn't being involved. So the T-square is in the mutable signs. We've got like in Sagittarius, Gemini and Pisces. So if you've got planets, like especially around the middle degrees of those signs, you're going to be especially feeling this energy of this moon. But then if we look opposite, we get Virgo as well, that mutable earth sign of Virgo, also Mercury's sign, you know. So I feel like just having that little like back layer of like practicality and organization, and being able to kind of feel like calling it done as well, you know, like being able to say, okay, I've done enough on that now, and I'm going to set aside some time to actually work on some projects that will bring me joy, or it's something that will bring me joy in this season. It's not always about like prioritizing other people as well. We also need to focus on our own needs, you know. And like we hear that all the time, don't we? And it's like, yeah, I know I need to focus on my own needs, but the people who actually need to do it are the ones who like still aren't doing it, even though we're hearing it again and again and again. So just try and see if you can do that. The other thing that I think is really interesting is, well, like everything's kind of so linked up right now as well, you know. We've got Mars trining this moon as well. You know, there is a courage, a kind of like a personal, I know, like I feel like people are coming to the stage, or will come to the stage in this cycle in December, of being like, yes, things are kind of crazy, but I am still a person, I'm still here, and I want to do the right thing. I want to kind of do what I can in this world, and I want to be like a force for good. I feel like that, like with this Mars coming into Leo and making this trine to the moon, it's giving us that kind of like optimism a little bit. Like we have got Jupiter there as well, you know, involved. It's giving us a little bit of optimism. It's also giving us a little bit of heart, a bit of courage. And it's like, okay, yes, things are not great, but what can I do? And that's one of the things as well when we're looking at that Virgo opposite that T-square, is like, when we try and influence things that are beyond our control, that is like a recipe for all kinds of crappy things, really, because it means that we kind of like give our power away. We focus on the wrong things. We end up getting frustrated because we can't actually like move the needle on any of that stuff anyway, because it's not in our control. So instead, what is in our control? And like the things that are our own sense of peace, our own sense of like our choice, how we spend our time, you know, how we, like Virgo is very connected with that, like the kind of day-to-day, I'm going back again to that idea of what we do in our day-to-day lives. We are in control of that. And so perhaps making our choices from those places rather from that zoomed out big picture thinking. Let's make choices based on the day-to-day, finding that magic, and just like literally making choices and getting through days on a day-to-day basis, maybe an hour by hour basis, if that is what you need right now. Yeah. Let's talk about this Neptune, or should we? Yeah, okay. So we've got we've got quite a nice aspect between Uranus in Taurus, and we've got Venus in Capricorn. So Uranus is actually in Venus's sign. So the fact that they're kind of like linking up here, and I do feel like Venus moving through Capricorn is kind of like soothing over that area which has been so well, just just sludged what's it called, like recycled, I suppose, since Pluto has been moving through there. But now Venus is moving through and kind of soothing things, and then she's forming this trine to Uranus here. So there could be potential for like some surprising, in a good way, changes as well in this moon cycle. And I feel like those things will come into place if we, like Venus is in Capricorn, so we need to kind of like practically make the space for them. There is an element of like the practical side of things behind this moon as well. It might feel a bit fast. I expect like this month will go really fast. Although I suppose with the retrograde planets, it may be not as fast as usual. Like I find December in general just kind of blink and you miss it, apart from that like weird week, that Omen Days week in between Christmas and New Year's, when it's like, what is happening to time? It's like a real liminal time. But yeah, it's like, we can get practical. We can also get like kind of comfortable, but we might have some like ideas, some breakthroughs, some aha moments about like how we might be able to use our resources better, how we can kind of like prioritize our self-care better, how we might even want to make some changes in our like work-life balance. Things like that are all kind of coming up with this moon as well. And so like, if we've taken that time, like what I was talking about first of all, of like being able to soothe our nervous system and feeding ourselves some of the things we need in order to kind of connect back in with the truth of ourselves, the core of ourselves, then we can start to make practical decisions and plan things from there. And I feel like that is where the breakthrough will come. It's not going to come through forcing, through pushing. It needs to come through attracting, through magnetizing, through opening space rather than driving a wedge, Yeah, so let's talk about this Pisces. So not this Pisces, this Neptune in Pisces. So Neptune's been in Pisces for a really long time. Next year, Pisces will be moving on out of, Neptune will be moving on out of Pisces. At the moment, it is... it's still retrograde, but it's kind of stationing now. It's like at the end of this sign, it's stationing. It is going to be going direct. I think it is direct by... Yeah, it's direct by the Gemini full moon on the 15th. So, it's just hanging around at these 27 degrees of Pisces at the moment. Very, very strong. And Neptune, when it is strong like that, it can have some wonderful gifts. It can give us these beautiful gifts of like being able to dream, having that kind of like vision for what we want to bring into being in this, like we'll probably be looking forward into the next year. And actually, on that note, I have made my Vision Your Year planning guide. If you want to have a guide to help you plan, like around this new moon, through this whole moon cycle, really, it's going to be a really good time for like visioning and planning out your new year. So I'll remember to link that as well in the description box if you would like a kind of guide to actually, instead of just kind of like scattergun setting random goals, and if you want to kind of have a more structured approach, which would make sense actually with the Virgo and with the planning, that like with Venus in Capricorn, if you want to have something beautiful to work with to give you this structure to be able to come up with goals and dreams and put them into a practical way forward, then that I've made that for you. So I'll link that down below. But yeah, so Neptune could give us this beautiful vision, this creativity, this imagination. It can also, though, sometimes lead us a little bit into disillusion, or even sometimes towards, like taking things which can take us out of reality. So like sometimes linked in with like taking like drugs or too much alcohol, or like experiences which kind of like pull us away from ourselves as well. So that's just something to bear in mind, and you will probably be able to tell yourself if you're the sort of person who could do with a little bit more Neptune, a little bit more dreaminess, a little bit more imagination, or if you're the sort of person who is like just in that world already, then just be aware that in this cycle, that is particularly a strong influence. So try and just make good choices really around taking anything that might enhance that, like that might just bring that, might kind of tip that over the edge a little bit too much, especially with it being fairly close to that North Node as well. It's like there's a lot of visionary energy coming in now, and we can accept that. We don't have to like get high on mushrooms necessarily. Like, I'm nothing against getting high on mushrooms. That can be a really good a good option sometimes for things, but that energy is like coming in spades already at the moment, so we don't necessarily need to do anything to encourage that. We just need to be open to it, and then we can accept it. Yeah. Okay, so talking about mushrooms, these were the cards that came out for our last moon cycle. We were working with the Five of Wands and the Empress. So we had that kind of like earthy, grounded Empress energy, and then that more kind of combative Five of Wands, kind of a challenge, really, like how are we going to move forward. And you know, like it did feel like that that last moon cycle did feel challenging in that way, but I think also it's like calling each of us up to take our own personal responsibility for ourselves as well. So you know, that has been the challenge that is thrown down, and whether or not we accept it is up to us. So I'm going to use the Intuitive Night Goddess Tarot for this next reading. This was a deck that was gifted to me by a local witch here, and I'd never even heard of it, I don't think, before, and I really love it. So yes, let's just give those a shuffle, and we're going to take 2 cards for this reading for this moon. All of these cards have goddesses on them, so I feel like it's got a really strong kind of like divine feminine energy in this deck, which probably will be quite a good counterpoint actually to this moon, which is picking up quite a lot of more like masculine influences in some ways. You know, like it's really awkward talking about the signs as being masculine and feminine, really. It's more like the polarity, like a positive and negative, but then also that's got problems. You know, when we're talking about negative, and people tend to take that as being like bad, and that's not necessarily the same thing either. So yeah, our language, this English language that we speak, is problematic in so many ways. You know, a lot of the values of the culture are embedded, like literally embedded in the language, and so like we can only express ourselves using those words that are given to us. So, but we can, you know, it's a living thing, isn't it, language, so we can change it and evolve it as we go too. Being conscious of it is the main thing. Okay, so what have we got? We've got the 2 of Swords. Ooh, and the 6 of Swords. Interesting. Okay, so we've got both swords, which is very on point for this moon, because, you know, we already talked about that Mercury aspect, and, you know, we've got Jupiter that is the ruler of this moon in Gemini. So like the 2 of Swords, very Gemini coded, you know, this idea of like kind of like an obstruction, or like being in your head, having this kind of like indecision that is kind of blocking you from here. She's also like in this 2 of Swords card, we can see that she has her eyes blindfolded, so it's bringing in ideas, elements of that kind of justice as well, the idea of like balance. And I feel like that is very much, you know, well, very connected in with this opposition that we're getting between Jupiter and Mercury, but going back to that idea of what we need that brings us balance, because we can't make our decision from a place of, we can't choose how we act now because we haven't got all of the information. If we're only focusing on our kind of like external environment, we actually have to get much more back in touch with that internal environment to get back in touch with those parts of ourselves which have kind of been like ostracized and pushed out. So like those inner child parts, those parts that just could get absorbed in an activity and the time would just go and you wouldn't even know, you know, those kind of things. And I feel like if we can bring those things in, then if at the moment you feel like you're kind of stuck and you don't know how to move forward, of course you don't. You need to be able to bring those things in so that you can remember yourself, remember who you are, and then you will be able to see a clear way, you know, you'll be able to sense a clear way forward. It's not just about like kind of like the logical thinking, forcing it through, you know, all of those things that I've talked about already in this video. We need to allow ourselves to think about these things. That thinking isn't just something that happens in our head, it's something that happens with our souls as well. You know, it brings in all parts of us. We've become kind of divorced from that, and so embedding ourselves back in that is really going to help. The way that she's holding these swords as well is making me think of like, it's like a barrier. So also perhaps having some sense of protection of ourselves in this moon cycle will be really helpful, especially because we're going to be dreaming, you know. We need to have that kind of like protected space where we can where we can dream, where we can kind of vision for next year, vision for this moon cycle, without having to like explain that to anybody else, or to say like, this is my end outcome. We might not be at that point yet. We're gathering, we're visioning. And so kind of having that space. If you notice, like behind her, there's all this like water here as well, so it feels like very deeply emotional too, like having that. We might feel very kind of protective of our feelings, of our emotions. Like we got this whole like landscape of stuff that is happening within us that we may not be able to communicate to anybody else. And like, that's okay. Like the time for communicating it will probably come if we need to further on down the line. But for now, in this moon cycle, we protect our energy. We tap back into that sense of self that we got when we were doing those activities that just fed us in a way that isn't just a part of our intellectual kind of conscious ego brain. Yeah. So protection and like inner knowing, intuition, allowing that to be fed by those other ways of being in that flow state. Yeah. And then the other card that's come out is the Six of Swords. So again, we're staying with this idea of swords, staying with that mental energy. And here we've got the goddess, and she looks almost like she's been in, well, perhaps like in a battle. She looks a little bit kind of like battered. She's got something kind of caught around her foot here, and she looks kind of like wistfully backwards, and we've got these six swords kind of like hanging in the sky. And the Six of Swords is a card about kind of, it's looking back and also looking forward. And I feel like this card has come out to acknowledge that, yes, when we look back, or even when we look around us right now, there is a lot of disorder that is happening, and that most of that disorder is caused by people holding very different points of view and being completely unable to kind of recognize or appreciate other people's points of view. They're coming from a place of like, I think like this, therefore I am this kind of person, and they go in that box. And it's like, if that person thinks like this, then they go in that box. We've got very black and white thinking around that, and it's kind of robbing us of like the nuance of all our humanity, really. And so I think this is saying, like, in this moon cycle, we will be feeling like some regret. We will probably be looking back on things that have happened recently, but I think also things that have happened long term as well. Like Pluto, it has moved into Aquarius now. We are at this beginning of this new epoch. And so we may well be looking back to things from our own childhoods. We may be looking back to things from, years gone by, really, and being like, oh, seeing things perhaps in a slightly different way. But the Six of Swords is also like, it's about movement as well. It's not about kind of like staying stuck here. Like, she's here now and she's regretful, but then there will be a point where it's like, okay, now I need to move forward from this. I need to move on from this. But it does feel like when we're looking at like the general energy of the planets and how kind of like fast they're moving and things like that, like there's time might feel weird in this moon cycle. I feel like, like it might feel in some ways that it's going very quickly, and then in other ways that it feels like strange, like it's kind of like slipping through our fingers like sand sometimes as well. So if you are feeling regretful and you're feeling like that need to protect yourself and getting all kind of up in your head about things, like what practices would help you with that, and maybe like I find journaling, like I talk about journaling a lot on this channel for a reason, because it is something that is just so helpful for me. I find just like writing things down just allows me to process my feelings and to get to a place of understanding, and then I can see where I can move forward. So that might be something. I think just doing those things, like I said, if you can tap into some of those activities you used to do as a child, that will also help, because like when you're not thinking about the problems, that's when those solutions just kind of like magically pop into your head, and present themselves. It's like we can't, all of this stuff is like we can't keep forcing. When we think of like what came before, when we have like that Five of Swords where it's like fighting, we can't keep forcing the way that we've been trying to address the problems that we find ourselves in. are not working. So we need to find different solutions. And yes, we may need to take this moon cycle to kind of lick our wounds a bit and to find a way to kind of like protect and regroup ourselves, but not with a view of going back into the same battle. You know, we can't just like go, I'm going to go back and do that same thing again. We need to be moving forward now. And the way that we do that is through rooting back in ourselves, in who we are, in our connection with spirit, in our connection with goddess, in our connection with the land, finding those activities which help us, which serve us, finding our version of everyday magic, whatever that is for you, that makes you believe and trust that there is magic in this world, that this world is beautiful, and that it is something wonderful actually that we are sharing together at this moment. Yeah. So I feel like that is the message that I wanted to share with you for this Sagittarius moon. I hope that you find it helpful, and I hope that this is a wonderful moon cycle for you. If you do have any comments, please leave them down below and I will reply. Thank you so much for watching. Warmest blessings, and I will see you very soon.